I have schizoaffective disorder, which is both a mood disorder and a psychotic disorder. A lot of people are familiar with schizophrenia, and when they tend to think of psychosis, they think of this. But not as many people are familiar with schizoaffective disorder, though it is quite similar. However, it's also quite similar with major mood disorders like bipolar disorder and major depression. You see, schizoaffective disorder is really two disorders in one. It is equal parts schizophrenia and a major mood disorder, as I said, bipolar or major depression. And in my case, I am schizoaffective bipolar type, meaning that I have bipolar disorder on top of schizophrenia. So yeah, you can have both at the same time. Some people are diagnosed schizophrenia with bipolar or major depression as two separate conditions. I don't really understand the distinction. From my understanding, this is just a matter of who's diagnosing you because they are really the same thing. So this for me is kind of complicated. To meet the diagnostic criteria for schizoaffective disorder, a person has to have psychosis in and out of mood episodes. When you're looking at things like bipolar or major depression with psychotic features, you have mood episodes concurrent with psychotic episodes, but the psychosis does not happen outside of that context. With schizoaffective, you need to have at least 2 weeks of just psychosis independent of the mood episodes, but that is absolutely a component, and having both at the same time is just as crucial to the diagnosis. Now, when you combine a mood episode with psychosis, it kind of plays out a little bit differently than the two independently. When I've had mood episodes independent of psychosis, they are pretty hard to manage. When I've had psychosis independent of the mood episodes, it's been debilitating. When I have both together, it is insurmountable. It is very difficult to navigate one or the other, let alone both together. And this can be very traumatic. It can have very long-lasting effects, especially when you're combining depression with psychosis. Psychotic depression is a beast all its own. Psychotic depression has to be, at least for me, the hardest part of psychosis, the most challenging experience I've had in my entire life, because it is so immersive and it is so dark and it has such depth. Today we're going to get into the nature of psychotic depression, how it plays out, and what it took to overcome it, how I've recovered from the experiences in psychosis that left me somewhat traumatized, what my life is like today outside of psychotic depression. Before we get started, I'd like to throw out a trigger warning to say that psychosis in and of itself is a sensitive subject that may at times be difficult to talk about. So if at any point during today's video I say anything that may be triggering or upsetting to you, you are more than welcome to leave. In this video specifically, we will be talking about extreme bodily harm, gore, sexual assault, things of that major nature, death, like the darkest of the dark. If that is not your cup of tea, you are more than welcome to leave. I will do my best not to go into explicit detail and to outline the experience in the most conservative way that I can. In the past, I did go into detail with my explanations, and that doesn't serve anyone. People who've been in psychosis already know how bad it can be, and loved ones have seen for themselves too. So there's no need to rehash the nitty-gritties. I will be speaking broadly on this subject. Also, a disclaimer to say that I am not a mental health care professional, and I am in no way qualified to give any advice, medical, psychiatric, or otherwise. Who I am simply is a person living with serious mental illness who is here to share with you the wisdom and insight I've gleaned along my journey of mental health recovery. So before I get into the combination of psychosis and depression, I want to look at both individually. starting with depression because that was the first symptom of mental illness I ever experienced. Depression for me is very dangerous. My first diagnosis was bipolar disorder type 2, which meant that I had hypomanic episodes rather than manic, and I had really, really deep depression. My depression started very young in life, and by the time I was in middle school, I had become suicidal. And from there, I did attempt to take my own life in high school. And so while I have had manic episodes, some quite grandiose manic episodes, mind you, the depression for me has always been the most severe, and it has been by far the most dangerous because while in mania, I may be inclined to streak down the streets thinking that I'm invisible and that I'm being called upon by God. In depression, I will end my life, period. So that, I guess, kind of sets the tone. Depression for me is really bleak and it's very heavy. It's kind of like this ever-present feeling of lies that I tell myself, lying to myself that I'm a waste of breath, I'm taking up space in the world that would be better for someone else. I have no reason to be this upset when there are people in much worse situations than me. I would be doing my family a favor by ending my life because I'm a burden on them. And these would be my most frequent common thoughts in depression, untreated. I did start to have a little bit of psychosis with my depression in high school, and it was scary because the nature of the hallucinations I was having were related to dark things. As you can imagine, when your mind is in a really dark place, what comes from your mind into your reality can be very dark as well. Switching gears to psychosis, my psychosis is all-encompassing, and it is basically right in front of my face. It is something that just is constantly distracting me from what's really going on, and it's kind of muddying my mind, blurring my vision. It's basically warped my perceptions of everything, my relationships, reality, how I watch TV or movies or, books. They become my reality. Things that are real don't feel real. But yeah, Hellraiser, that felt very real. So psychosis is this giant thing. It is far reaching. It's so far outside of myself. While depression crushes in on me, psychosis just reaches farther and farther and farther until I have no reality left. When the two are combined, I spiral. I mean, it is the hardest thing to get through in psychosis. It can really lock me in my head. It's very hard to get out when I'm not only psychotic, I'm depressed. I tend to really shut in. I think a really common part of psychotic depression for people is paranoia. And I become a shut-in when I'm paranoid. I don't leave the house. I become really trapped in my environment, and my environment becomes triggering to me. My environment becomes the things that scare me. And for instance, I watched a lot of horror movies before psychosis. I was known as the gore queen. I was known for watching the worst things possible that anyone else would walk away from. I had a very high tolerance for this kind of stuff, but in psychosis, that became my reality. Psychotic depression took the worst, most visceral experiences, whether they were not real like in the media or real themselves, and put them on my lap, made me suffer through them, and it hurt. Some of my delusions, and mind you, this was heavily delusional. Apparently, it's more common in psychotic depression to have delusions than hallucinations. So some of my delusions that were related to horror movies had to do with, for instance, Hellraiser. Hellraiser being my favorite movie of all time. I have a tattoo of it on my leg. I was obsessed with this. I became one of the Cenobites. I was in a relationship with Pinhead, the main Cenobite. I was a demon from hell. I was trapped in hell, and I'd had this torturous backstory of how I became a demon. Even things that weren't involved in the movie, my mind fabricated. This was the first of the darker delusions I had. It did absolutely escalate from there. My delusions would become applied to myself, things in my environment, people around me. Whatever was within reach was tainted by the psychotic depression. And so, starting with myself personally, I had a delusion called Cotard's delusion, and I've spoken about this before. Cotard's delusion is kind of like, I don't know if I would say it's a somatic delusion where it involves your body, but it does. It involves your body because people with this delusion tend to believe that they are dead or that they are immortal and can't be killed, which actually can be really awful. Like if you think that I don't know, I won't get into it. As I said, I'm trying to speak broadly about this, but I would not only believe I was dead, I often believed I was dead. I would believe that my body was wrong. Like some people with this delusion may believe they're missing organs, they're missing blood, and I would believe that my leg was corrupted, like it was putrefying. This was terrifying. As you can imagine, like if you had gangrene crawling all up your leg and you would lose your leg, it's very scary. And I did go to extreme measures to try to correct this. Fortunately, I was not successful, but it can be so severe that a person would actually try to harm themselves. The delusions I had of being dead would involve going through deaths, like the act of dying. And it's very scary. And I would have delusions of, being on fire or being hanged. There were many different deaths and they were frequent. This would happen over and over and over again. And it is very hard to come back from that kind of trauma, whether it's perceived or not. Having experienced the sensations and feelings associated with death, it's really traumatic. Not only that, people around me were affected. My ex-husband, for instance, who I was married to at the time, was a great source of delusions for me. I would think that he was a demon in hell and that he was trying to SA me for eternity. I'd think he was trying to physically torture me. At one point, I did think I had killed him. I believed that he was dead and I was responsible. That is another very traumatic feeling to walk away from, whether it's perceived or not, to believe that you have taken someone's life. It feels awful. And now this is really just the tip of the iceberg. These are just some really clear examples I can think of, but this goes so much farther than that, especially because mood episodes can last weeks. And so being in psychotic depression for such a long time, it really affected me in the long run, because the longer I was in the psychotic depression, the more things were realistic and harmful and painful to experience. Coming out of psychosis, I carried a lot of that with me. Even though the experience stopped and I knew it had never really happened, the experience was still something I experienced. Real or not, I had the feelings associated as if that were real. I took away the trauma as if that were real. And I walked away with so much trauma, so much work to do in therapy, lots and lots and lots of triggers. Surviving psychotic depression to me means learning to live with the aftermath of what had happened to me. Like anyone who is a survivor, say a cancer survivor, like a plane crash survivor, you don't just survive the event, you continue on afterwards and you have to heal. That's just part of being a survivor. And I've survived a lot. So there was so much work to do. And surviving psychotic depression for me was navigating a world that had become very triggering to me, being a part of reality in places that had been tainted by my delusions, being in relationships with people that I'd been afraid of in psychosis, and repairing a lot of this damage. And, with triggers especially, just about everything triggered me. Almost everything, food, objects, like noises would set me off. And I'd be terrified in that state all over again. With just about everything triggering me, I couldn't really go through a day without this affecting me. So for years after psychotic depression, I was still in it. Now, triggers being the hardest challenge to overcome after psychotic depression are something I'm still working on years later. My first psychotic episode was in 2010, and I've had like four since then. Oh man, I totally forgot how many. Wait, no, it doesn't matter. I've had multiple episodes since then. My most recent lasted a few months and ended in 2020. So for 10 years, I was in and out of psychosis, and I accumulated a lot of stuff over each episode. And it's been, a decade of stuff to work through. I have worked on both, I guess, like choosing triggers to desensitize myself to and overcome, and accepting that there are some things I may just never get back. A lot of triggers are things I actually like. As I said, Hellraiser was my favorite movie, but also just normal things like books I'd read in psychosis, shows I'd watch that were like kids shows even, because they were just tainted by psychosis. So some things I've accepted. I may never watch that movie again. I may never eat that food again. But some things were so worth it. I really have dedicated a lot of effort to recovering specific things that I missed. One such trigger was Adventure Time. This was my favorite movie or show in college. My friends and I would watch it every week when the new episode would release. And I guess I cut that short in one of the seasons and didn't finish it. And for years and years and years, I really wanted to watch Adventure Time, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I don't know exactly when I realized I was capable of watching it, but one day I realized I think I can take on this challenge. I think I can face it. So I did start watching it. And while there would be times that were triggering that I'd have to leave the room and maybe take a week or two away from watching, I managed to come back to it and push through these triggers, get to the other side, and finish the show. It was a huge emotional marathon for me and very rewarding. And because I accomplished that, I was able to build this resistance within myself to accomplish even more. A lot of foods were triggering to me because I would either believe I was eating feces or human flesh. And I lost a lot of weight in psychosis. I was very, very underweight, and there were even notes in my records from the hospital saying that I was refusing food and throwing fits and picking fights with the nurses over it because I would not eat. So eating was very difficult, and a lot of the foods that I ate in psychosis, I haven't been able to eat ever since. But I've discovered that if I create a pleasant experience around like reintroducing a food, I can do it. Like I ate pesto with my brother for the first time in years because I felt safe with my brother. I've discovered I can eat certain foods if I feel safe with the people with me. So I've eaten sourdough bread. I've eaten tomatoes, not that I like tomatoes, just that it was something to overcome. And the triggers have gotten a lot easier. There are still some I struggle with. Black socks are one of my biggest triggers. I can't even walk down the sock aisle at a store because the black socks trigger me so greatly. It's very hard to explain that specific delusion because it's so like internal that there really isn't like examples or pictures to depict. It's a lot more of a feeling and a sensation. So black socks are one that I may never get back, but I'm working towards it. I got myself black socks that have designs on them, so they're not entirely black. And while I don't like to wear them, I've made myself wear them, and I think that's a step forward. So there's still a lot of progress to make, but I'm getting there. Anyway, psychotic depression was really damaging and harder to get through than your ordinary psychosis. I don't think psychosis is ever ordinary, but psychotic depression was a really large hurdle for me even after psychosis. This was something that took years and effort to recover from. I had to actually face it. It wasn't something that I just got better with time. This was something that I consciously worked on. My current goal with triggers is to watch the sequel of Hellraiser, Hellbound Heart, which I believe is the best movie in the franchise. This was the movie I really connected with when I first watched it because there's a character, Tiffany, that I resonated with. And for the past month, I have just been like hyping myself up for this, and I'm working towards it. There's some steps it will take before I can actually watch it. For instance, I will probably have to Google Cenobites and look at Cenobites. I might have to read the synopsis before I watch it. I might watch a scene, maybe 2 scenes, but it's not something you just dive into. It takes a lot of work even just to do one trigger. So this is the next trigger I'm working on. This is from a delusion I had like 10 years ago. And so I'm really excited to reclaim it. I don't know if it will go well. I hope it goes well, but that's just the gamble you take when you're overcoming triggers. So yeah, psychotic depression is really intense and it's really debilitating. It can seriously knock you on your ass. At least it did for me. It was by far the hardest experience in psychosis. I would much prefer manic psychosis because that's kind of fun, but not that psychosis is all that fun, just that like when you're manic in psychosis, you feel pretty powerful, pretty like fully yourself. Like I'd think that I was in control of the weather and that was pretty cool, or I think I could communicate with animals because I was telepathic. Like I'd have all these supernatural abilities. I could touch any music and instantly, or any instrument and instantly play it. Like I was like kind of a hot shot. So psychotic depression is very much the opposite. Psychotic depression is very hard to live with. It's very hard to recover from. If you or a loved one have walked down that path of experiencing psychotic depression, first or second hand, I want you to know that there is no deadline for recovering. There's no point where you're expected to be better. If it takes you years and years to be better from psychotic depression, I'd say you're doing great just to be on that path at all. Don't let the experiences and the trauma limit you. It's really hard to do the work, but it is so important. Your life will be so much more free if you choose to heal and recover from this experience. It's a whopper. But you know, have patience with yourself, have grace, and just remember that it can't get much worse at this point. So your life will get a lot better from here. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching my video. I truly appreciate it. Check out my merch. There should be ads running below the video. I designed it all myself. I'm an artist. I love digital art. So yep, you can wear my cool swag, and please like, comment, or subscribe if you'd like to support my channel. Hit that bell to stay notified of any future videos, and let me know in the comments what your experience with psychotic depression was like. Has your loved one experienced it, or have you experienced it personally? And if you have no relation, what did you take from this video, and what more would you like to know? I could happily talk about it in future videos. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much. Bye. So close your eyes.